My daughter Mira was sitting on the living room floor, giggling as she played with the shiny birthday toy my mother-in-law had brought. It was bright pink, shaped like a tiny robot, and it lit up whenever she tapped its head. She loved it instantly. For a moment, I let myself relax. Maybe, just maybe, Claudette was finally trying to be part of Myra's life. But then Mira suddenly stopped laughing. She pressed both hands to the sides of her head and let out a sharp cry that made my whole body go cold. "Mommy, it hurts. My head hurts," she sobbed. Within minutes, she was shaking. I scooped her up and raced to the car, barely remembering to grab my keys. At the ER, everything happened in a blur. Nurses rushed her into a room, attaching wires and checking her vitals. I stood there helpless, feeling like the floor was slipping out from under me. Mira was only 6, bright, gentle, the kind of child who apologized even when things weren't her fault. Seeing her in pain like that made something inside me break. When the doctor finally returned, he held the toy in his gloved hand with a strange look on his face. He turned it over slowly, pressing on the back panel. A faint click sounded. Then he froze. His eyes lifted to mine, and he took one step back as if the thing might explode. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I need you to call the police immediately." The room felt suddenly smaller. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Call the police? Why? What's inside that thing?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the toy in a sealed biohazard bag. "We'll explain when they get here. But this device doesn't belong anywhere near a child." My mind immediately went to the woman who had brought it, the only person in my life capable of smiling sweetly while twisting a knife behind her back. Claudette Rowan, my ex-husband's mother. Elegant, polished, always carrying herself like she came from royalty. And from the day I married her son, she had made it clear she didn't think I was good enough to raise a Rowan child. She hadn't even been invited to Myra's birthday. She just appeared at my door with that tight smile and a shiny gift bag, talking about a special imported toy from Europe. Something she claimed Mira deserved more than anything I could give her. I should have trusted my instincts. Claudette never did anything without a reason. While Mira lay in the hospital bed, her small hand limp in mine, fear twisted into something darker, suspicion then anger. Within an hour of playing with that toy, my daughter was in the ER. And now the police were on their way. My stomach churned as the truth slowly surfaced in my mind. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted to hurt us. And I already knew exactly who. Dr. Warren Pike came into the room with a serious look on his face. He held the sealed bag with the toy inside, and I could tell something was wrong before he even spoke. He sat down in front of me and said the toy had a harmful device hidden inside it, something a child should never be near. He didn't go into detail, but the way he spoke made my stomach twist. It wasn't just unsafe. It was dangerous. Before I could ask more questions, 2 police officers entered the room. The doctor handed the bag to them, and they treated it like evidence from a crime scene. One officer asked me where the toy came from, and when I told them it was a birthday gift, they exchanged a look that made my heart drop. They took the toy away immediately and promised to contact me once they understood what was inside it. While Mira was being prepared for more tests, I stepped into the hallway and pulled out my phone. I tried calling Seth, but he didn't answer. I tried again, and it went straight to voicemail. Even though we were no longer together, he was still Myra's father. I thought he would at least pick up when his daughter was in the hospital. Instead, he avoided me completely, which only added to the fear building inside me. The nurse rolled Mira away for scans, and I followed for as long as they allowed me. Watching her small body disappear behind those double doors made my throat tighten. I felt helpless, angry, and terrified all at once. The minutes dragged by, and every worst thought rushed into my head. I kept replaying the moment she grabbed her head and screamed. Kids get sick, sure, but this felt different. It felt intentional. As I sat in the hallway, the idea settled deeper and deeper into my mind. This wasn't some random accident. Someone had done this. Someone had put something harmful inside a child's toy. And the only person who brought that toy into our home was Claudette. When the officers finished speaking with the doctor, one of them asked for Claudette's number. I gave it to them, even though my hands were shaking. A part of me hoped there was some explanation, something that would make sense of all this. But when they called her and put the phone on speaker, her reaction made the hair on my arms rise. She sounded calm. Too calm. When they told her about the device inside the toy, she didn't gasp, she didn't sound confused. She didn't even ask how Mira was doing. Instead, she simply said, "I'm sure there is a misunderstanding. in that smooth voice she always used when hiding something. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. The fear turned into certainty. Someone planned this, and I knew exactly where the trail was pointing. A few hours later, one of the detectives returned to speak with me. He sat down, opened a small folder, and explained that the device found inside the toy wasn't new to them. Something similar had been seen in another private investigation case. It was connected to a family fighting over money and inheritance. Hearing that made my chest tighten. What did any of this have to do with my little girl? Why would something tied to an inheritance issue end up inside my daughter's birthday gift? Before I could ask more questions, my phone finally buzzed. Seth's name flashed on the screen. I stepped into a corner of the waiting area and answered, hoping he'd be concerned. Instead, his voice came through sharp and annoyed. He said he was busy and didn't understand why I was making a scene. When I told him what the doctor and police found, he didn't sound shocked. He acted like I was exaggerating everything. It felt like he was defending someone before I even mentioned her name. Then he said it. My mother wouldn't give Mira anything dangerous. His tone made it clear he wasn't calling to help. He was calling to shut me up. Later, the detectives contacted Claudette themselves, and they played part of the conversation for me. Hearing her voice made every muscle in my body tense. She insisted the toy was perfectly safe, and then blamed me. She said I was overreacting, that I was always creating drama, and that Mira probably had a simple headache I was turning into something bigger. Her smooth, cold voice brought back a memory I had pushed deep down. It was from years ago, when Mira was just a baby. Claudette had cornered me in the kitchen during a holiday dinner. She smiled politely, but her words were sharp. You will never be good enough to raise a Rowan child. I remember how those words burned, but I had forced myself to forget them for the sake of peace. Hearing her now brought that moment back with full force. The same tone, the same quiet cruelty. As the night went on, I found myself replaying every strange thing she had done over the years. The little comments, the way she always tried to control decisions about Mira, the sudden visits, the gifts that never felt like gifts, the way she always talked about the Rowan family as if it were some kind of empire. Piece by piece, the picture became clearer. This wasn't something random. This didn't feel like bad luck or a simple mistake. Someone had a reason, a plan, and Claudette was somehow in the center of it. For the first time, I felt something stronger than fear, betrayal. Someone in that family wanted to hurt me, and they didn't care if Mira got caught in the middle. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I drove to visit Seth's aunt, Lenora Vale. She was one of the few people in the Rowan family who had ever treated me with warmth. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask polite questions. She simply let me in and told me to sit. I must have looked frightened, because her expression changed to worry right away. As soon as I explained what happened at the hospital, Lenora let out a tired sigh, almost as if she had been expecting something like this. She leaned closer and told me to watch Mira closely, her voice low and serious. It wasn't just a warning. It felt like she was afraid of something much bigger. I asked her what she meant, and after a long pause, she finally started sharing things I had never heard before. She told me the Rowan family had a history of trying to control who raised their children. According to her, there had been custody fights in the past, ones the public never heard about because the family had money and influence. She described situations where certain relatives stepped in, hired lawyers, and pushed parents out of their children's lives. Listening to her made my stomach turn. I had always known Claudette liked control, but I never imagined anything like this. Then Lenora told me something that chilled me even more. She said she heard Claudette had hired a lawyer weeks before Myra's birthday. No one knew why. She hadn't mentioned it to Seth, and she definitely hadn't said anything to me. Hearing that felt like someone had dropped a stone into my chest. Why would she need a lawyer? And why before Myra's birthday? Everything started clicking together in the worst way. The strange toy, the device inside it, the calm reaction she had when the police contacted her, the way Seth defended her without hesitation. Suddenly it all felt connected, like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to see completed. As I sat there in Lenora's kitchen, the idea formed clearly in my mind. Claudette might be trying to take Mira from me. It wasn't just dislike anymore. It wasn't petty comments or cold looks. This felt planned, calculated. If she had a lawyer, and if there was a family pattern of manipulating custody, then Mira wasn't safe, not from strangers, but from her own grandmother. By the time I left Lenora's house, my hands were shaking. I drove home slowly, thinking through every conversation, every warning sign I had ignored. I realized I had to protect myself and Mira, even if I didn't yet understand the full picture. So I started writing everything down. Every phone call, every comment, every piece of information from the doctors and detectives. It felt strange to treat my own family like a threat, but something inside me knew I had to be careful. Whatever Claudette was planning, I wasn't going to let her succeed. Not with my daughter. Not ever. Later that week, the detectives called me back to the station. I sat across from them as they placed a small folder on the table. One of the detectives explained that their lab had finished testing the device hidden inside the toy. He said it could affect a child's nervous system and cause the exact symptoms Mira had experienced. Hearing those words made my whole body go cold. This wasn't just dangerous. It was something someone had put there on purpose. The detectives didn't dance around it. They told me they believed the toy had been tampered with. They were now looking closely at who had access to it before it reached our home. Since Claudette was the one who brought it, they were focusing heavily on her. I felt a mix of fear and anger rise inside me, but before I could ask more questions, my phone buzzed. Seth was outside my house. By the time I got home, he was on my porch, pacing back and forth. As soon as he saw me, he said he wanted to take Mira for a few days. He tried to make it sound harmless, claiming she needed a calmer environment and that I was too stressed. His voice was firm, as if he had already made the decision for me. I told him no. Not after everything that had happened. Not after he ignored my calls when Mira was in the hospital. He didn't take my refusal well. His face twisted with anger, and he started accusing me of creating drama and turning the family against him. I tried to stay calm, but the argument grew louder and uglier. He kept insisting he was trying to fix things, but his behavior didn't match his words. Then he said something he didn't mean to say. He snapped. I knew about my mother's plan, but I didn't think it would go this far. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. I stared at him, shocked. He immediately tried to backtrack, mumbling that he didn't mean it like that. But the damage was already done. My hands were shaking, but I kept my phone steady in my pocket. I had tapped the record button the moment I walked up to him. Something inside me had told me to be careful. He kept talking, trying to twist his words, but everything he said only made it clearer. He wasn't surprised about the toy. He wasn't confused. He was scared he'd be blamed. I let him finish rambling, then told him to leave. He tried to push his way back into the conversation, but I shut the door firmly. I locked it while he was still yelling on the other side. Inside the quiet house, I finally listened to the recording. His words were clear, undeniable. My chest tightened as I realized just how deep this betrayal went. Claudette wasn't acting alone. Seth knew something all along. And now I had proof. A few days later, I woke up to a knock on my door. When I opened it, a court officer handed me a packet of papers. My heart dropped as I read the first line. Claudette had filed an emergency motion for temporary custody of Mira. She was claiming I was neglecting my own daughter. The words felt unreal, almost like a bad dream. After everything she had done, she was now accusing me of being unfit. The court date was set right away. When I walked into the courtroom, Claudette was already there. She sat straight-backed, dressed like she was attending some grand event. Beside her were two expensive-looking attorneys. They carried folders full of documents, and from the way they whispered to her, I could tell they were confident. Too confident. As the hearing started, her lawyers presented reports claiming Mira was not being cared for properly. I knew they were lies, but hearing them spoken out loud made my chest tighten. Claudette kept her face calm, acting like she was simply trying to save her granddaughter. And then Seth walked in and sat beside her. He didn't even look at me. He gave a statement supporting everything his mother said. In that moment, it felt like he had cut the last thread between us. When it was finally my turn to speak, my hands trembled, but I stood up. I handed the judge the recording from the porch, Seth admitting he knew about his mother's plan. I also gave them the doctor's report and showed proof that the police were already involved in investigating the toy. The courtroom grew quiet. Even Claudette's lawyers looked uncomfortable for a moment. The judge took his time reviewing everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm. He said Claudette was not allowed any unsupervised contact with Mira. All visits would have to be supervised by a court-approved professional. He also issued a temporary restraining order preventing Claudette from coming near me or Mira until the investigation was complete. Claudette's face changed instantly. The calm mask she always wore cracked. As she walked out of the courtroom, She leaned close enough for me to hear her sharp whisper. "This isn't over." I didn't respond. I just held Myra's backpack tighter and watched her leave. A mix of fear and relief washed over me. The court had believed me, but I knew Claudette. She wasn't going to walk away quietly, and something in her eyes told me she was already planning her next move. After the hearing, I realized I couldn't relax. Claudette was quiet, and her silence scared me more than her shouting ever could. I knew I had to stay ahead of her, so I worked closely with the detectives handling the case. They introduced me to a child safety attorney named Reed Marston. He spoke calmly, listened carefully, and made me feel like I finally had someone on my side who understood exactly how serious this was. Reed began digging through every document the police collected. He also searched into the Rowan family records, especially anything tied to Mira. One afternoon, he called me into his office. When I sat down, he slid a folder across the desk. Inside were old financial papers from Seth's late grandfather. What I read made my stomach twist. There was a trust fund in Myra's name, something no one had ever told me about. If anything happened to me, or if Claudette gained legal custody, she would gain full control of the money. It wasn't a small amount either. It was enough to change someone's life completely. Reed explained that based on everything we'd uncovered, Claudette had a strong financial reason to remove me from Myra's life. Suddenly, everything made sense. The sudden interest in Mira. The lawyer she hired weeks before the birthday. The strange toy. The false reports. It was never about love or concern. It was about money and control. That night, I decided I needed answers directly from Seth. I went to his apartment, not sure if he would even open the door. But when he saw me, his face looked tired and worn. I stepped inside and asked him one question: why? At first, he tried to act defensive, but he couldn't hold it. The weight of everything finally broke him. He sat down and covered his face with his hands. He told me Claudette convinced him the toy was only a tracking device, something to monitor where Mira was because she claimed I was unpredictable. He said he believed her because she had been manipulating him his whole life. When the truth came out, he panicked, hoping it wouldn't become what it now was. He said he never meant for Mira to get hurt. Hearing him admit it felt strange. It wasn't comfort, but it was confirmation. He had known more than he ever admitted, and he let everything spiral because he was afraid of standing up to his mother. I left his place feeling drained but clearer than before. His confession wasn't enough to fix anything, but it helped the detectives. When I returned home, they were already preparing the paperwork. With the evidence collected, the device, the custody motion, the lawyer records, Seth's admission, the police were ready to file charges against Claudette. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small bit of strength returning. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was fighting back. The moment the police were ready to arrest Claudette, everything took a sudden turn. When they went to her house with the warrant, she was gone. Her car was missing, her phone was turned off, and no one in the neighborhood had seen her since early morning. Hearing this made my heart race. A woman like Claudette didn't run because she was scared of the law. She ran because she still believed she could win. My first thought was Mira. If Claudette was desperate enough to flee, she might be desperate enough to try something even worse. I kept Mira close to me at all times. I didn't take her to the park, didn't let her walk ahead of me, and didn't sleep deeply. Every sound outside made me jump. Even though the detectives told me they were doing everything they could, fear stayed in my chest like a tight knot. One night, that fear grew even stronger. I was in the living room, trying to stay awake, when I heard a soft crunch in the yard. It wasn't loud, but it was close enough that I froze. I walked quietly toward Myra's room and looked out the window. The moonlight showed faint footprints in the patch of dirt below her window. Someone had been there, too close, too quietly. I called the detectives immediately. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up outside. They checked the area but didn't find anyone. One of the officers pulled me aside and said they believed Claudette was trying to watch the house or check if she could get near Mira. The thought made my stomach twist. This wasn't just running from the police anymore. This was her making one last move, one last push to get what she wanted. After that night, the detectives increased patrols. Every few hours, a car would drive by. They also put a unit near Myra's school to be safe. I appreciated it, but I still barely slept. I kept seeing those footprints whenever I closed my eyes. A few days later, I received a call early in the morning. It was Detective Reed. His voice sounded tense but relieved. He told me Claudette had been found 2 towns away. She had gone to a small travel agency known for shady paperwork and was trying to buy a fake passport. She used a different name and even brought cash, but the clerk became suspicious and quietly called the police. When the detectives arrived, she didn't fight. She tried to talk her way out of it, but nothing worked. They detained her on the spot and arranged to bring her back to our county for formal arrest. When I heard those words, "She is in custody," I felt my body finally loosen. For days, I had been living in fear, waiting for the worst to happen. Now, at least for a moment, I felt like Mira and I could breathe again. Claudette's running had failed. Her last desperate move was over. And now she would have to face everything she had done. The courtroom felt cold when the trial finally started, but I kept telling myself I had to stay strong for Mira. When my name was called, I stood up with shaky legs and walked to the witness stand. My voice trembled at first, but I pushed through it. I told the court everything. How Mira was laughing on the living room floor one minute and screaming in pain the next. How the doctor reacted when he saw the toy. How the police took it away, and how terrified I was through every moment. As I spoke, the courtroom grew quiet. I could see the shock on the jurors' faces, and for the first time, I felt like someone finally understood the fear I lived with. Then Seth took the stand. He still couldn't look me in the eyes. His voice sounded tired and full of regret as he explained how his mother had controlled him for years. He admitted that Claudette pushed him into decisions, pressured him constantly, and convinced him she always knew what was best for him and for Mira. He said he thought the toy was just a tracking device, not something dangerous, and that he didn't know how far Claudette was willing to go. Hearing him say it out loud hurt, but it also showed the court exactly how she manipulated everyone around her. The toy was brought out next. Even sealed inside a plastic evidence bag, it made my stomach twist. The experts explained the hidden device, how it worked, and how it caused Myra's symptoms. I sat there clutching my hands, wishing I could go back in time and stop everything before it happened. The judge listened carefully, and I could tell the truth was finally settling in. Claudette sat at her table pretending she was still in control, but her face changed each time another piece of evidence was shown. The attempt to run, the fake passport, the secret plans, it all came out one by one. And with each detail, the wall she built around herself cracked a little more. Then the judge gave the verdict. I held my breath until the words were spoken. Claudette was found guilty of child endangerment, attempted abduction, and tampering with a consumer product. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. She finally faced consequences for everything she had done. But the moment that truly broke me was the custody ruling. The judge said I was being granted full custody of Mira. Seth would not be allowed to see her until he completed therapy and proved he could be a safe parent. I felt tears fill my eyes, this time from relief, not fear. When I walked out of the courtroom holding Myra's little hand, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The fight was over. Justice was delivered. And I had protected my daughter. After the trial, I knew I needed a fresh start. I packed our things and moved with Mira to a quieter, safer neighborhood in Oregon. The air felt different there, lighter, calmer, and I finally felt like I could let my guard down a little. Our new home was small but peaceful, and all I cared about was giving Mira a place where she could feel safe again. Not long after we settled in, a letter arrived with Seth's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, but a bigger part of me knew I didn't owe him anything anymore. I placed the letter in a drawer without opening it. His words couldn't undo what happened, and I didn't want his guilt to drag me back into a painful past. A week later, I met with Reed, the child safety attorney who had helped me through everything. He sat across from me in his office, looking both proud and concerned. He told me there was one more thing I could do, not out of spite, but for Myra's future. He explained that I could file a civil suit against Claudette's estate, since her actions directly harmed Mira. At first, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to feel like I was fighting forever. But Reed reminded me that Claudette had been trying to take control of the trust meant for Mira. If I filed the suit, I could protect that money for my daughter. So I agreed. The process took months, but in the end, I won. The trust that Claudette wanted so badly, the one she tried to control by hurting us, was placed fully under my management. It didn't feel like revenge in the loud, dramatic way people imagine. It was quiet, simple, a way of making sure Myra's future would never again be touched by someone who meant her harm. Time passed and slowly Mira healed. Her headaches faded, her fear disappeared, and her laughter returned. She started at a new school, made new friends, and began to sleep through the night again. Watching her recover was the greatest relief I had felt in years. Every smile, every sleepy hug, every moment of peace reminded me why I had fought so hard. One evening, as I watched her draw pictures on the living room floor, safe, happy, and completely unaware of the battles fought for her, I felt something settle inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It was a calm sense of victory. I didn't win by hurting anyone. I won by protecting my child, by choosing peace, and by rebuilding a life where she could grow without fear. That was my quiet revenge, not violence, not shouting, not fury. Just taking back control, step by step, and giving Mira the stability Claudette tried to destroy. In the end, we rose above everything, and that was more powerful than anything she ever planned. Do you think I did the right thing by leaving Seth behind? Or should I have given him another chance? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.